So, what horrors are behind this? Oh dear. Ah, yes. Okay, so I tackled the water on the other corner of the camper last year or the year before. So now I need to tackle it on this side. It's probably coming in somewhere at the top there, and you can see that the interior surface has bubbled up. So we need to strip all this down, see what the state of things is behind here, and then let it air and see what we can repair and see how much of a horror story it is. So I've already removed this. This is some sort of tie down type thing. It's not really up to the job, it's not strong enough because that's only thin plywood behind there. So now I need to take all these out. Now I must have replaced these in the past with stainless steel screws, so that's why they're not looking rusty. But I suspect any that are not stainless are going to look rusty. Okay, we're now into, these are the original camper ones, and yeah, that looks a bit damp and rusty. Is that a Richardson head? Now I reckon with a bit of persuading this will just pull straight off. I should really cut this, but then if I pull it off, some of the this sealant might come with it. There's putty tape behind here, so it will stick more than the sealant implies it would. There's the putty tape. So this piece of trim will go back on, so that means I'm not going to bend it too much out of shape. Yep, there's clearly quite a bit of water in there. Every time we pulled away from the driveway, because the driveway leans very slightly, the water would then start to drip out of here, showing that this area was filling up. So we'll take this trim section off next. So what they tend to do is have these end caps which are screwed in just to tidy things up, and then when you peel this away, which I'll try and save so I don't have to buy a new one, you can access the rest of the screws which are behind here. So this is 30 years old now, and it's had quite a few years just sitting out in the UK wet weather, so it's not really designed for that. It's more designed for Arizona.
Yeah. I wonder how many things are actually left even there.
Yeah, I don't think there's that many.
Yeah, well, yes, we are.
There we go. So, what's the disaster behind here? Oh yes, that's all a bit damp. Yeah, so it's all come down here. It's probably salvageable actually. This is all stapled in as well. They staple this to the woodwork, so we'll have a load of staples to remove here like this. So we've also got this pink insulation, fiberglass insulation in here, so I've got to pull this out because it's all wet. It'll help this dry out. Oh yeah, that's got very wet. That's only plywood on the inside though. It's not structural. So I've peeled that trim down. We'll just take the first few screws out of this side. Yeah, it's not too bad. I have to be careful because this nose cone is fiberglass and I don't want to damage this. Certainly won't be able to get a replacement for it. Okay, so that's the plywood underneath the bed, so that seems pretty good. So the water's just got down here. What I'll do, I'll put this in there just to leave an air gap, and hopefully the breeze will get in here and help dry it over the next few days. Yeah, that's all wet up there. This is the gas locker. So Andy Nicklin big thanks to Andy Nicklin for doing a load of fiberglassing work for me a while back, free of charge. Really good job he did there. That's helped preserve this for several years. Hopefully I can retain this, but it might have to come out because I suspect it's probably all rotten under there. Try and preserve this trim. There we go. So all the putty tape sticks it in place. There we go. Oh dear. Oh dear. The corner jacking point off. I think we can replace this as well. Oh yes, that's not much left of that. Oh dear me. Is that released? So, what horrors are behind this? Oh dear. Ah yes. That's got very wet all the way along. Wow. Okay, not quite the right tool for the job, but should be able to clear away some of this junk so we can get a better look at it. Okay, so prise this off. Yeah, water's coming down from there, so it must be coming probably round the window. And it hasn't rained in a while. I think we'll have to get the window out and see where the water's coming from. It'll be somewhere up here. It's probably leaking in at the top here because the whole of the panel behind here, you can see it's all corrugated, it's got wet. I've never had this window out before, not this side. So with the 5 screws out that pierce this seal, you can pull this out and then get to the other screws underneath. So with all the screws out, I should be able to just prise this whole window unit out. Water dripping on me as I pull that away. So I can see this side, which is at the back, it's all wet there, so it's all been leaking down here. It's come along here, and this is wet here. So this is where the two parts join. So it's leaking down there. So I've stapled a bit of plastic sheeting on the inside just so I don't get told off getting all the bedding dirty. So now we can try and pull this off without doing too much damage, hopefully, to the... Right, that's that off. So what's it like? That's wet. Oh, that's all very wet. Yep. So it's all running down the back of the window here, the front of the window. And if I put my fingers up there, oh, that's all soaking wet. And that's wet in there as well. So it's coming down here and going front and back. I've cleared away some of this, it's really rotten under here. This is some plywood I put in here and here, and it's all rotted away. This must be marine ply, and I must have just used normal softwood ply. So I think unfortunately I am going to have to cut this section out that Andy created. I've got round this. I'm going to ignore these bits and leave these bits glued in place at the moment because I think the ply behind them is fine. And I'm going to try and ease this thing out. Right, after much cutting and hammering, this is now free. So this is the bit I want to salvage and reuse as a sort of tray, but getting it out has been a nightmare. Okay, there we go. And then, yes, it needs a bit of cleaning up. Very good. And then I'll work out how much of this ply I need to cut back and replace. So what's strange is halfway along here this is extremely soft. I'm going to have to replace this timber because I was assuming the leaking is happening this end. But if we go inside, I have just removed the cushions over here. There's a bit of carpet on here, and yes, that's slightly moist. This is a continuation of that piece from outside, so a section will have to at minimum be cut away, but that's clearly a completely different water leak up there to the one that's down here. So we've got two problems that need sorting out. I was a bit worried about using just the sawhorse here as the only support for this corner. I mean, it seems very strong, so I've just repurposed one of the corner jack that I took off here and turned the mounting upside down, the one that unbolted from the plywood. I'm just using that as an additional bit of support just in case. It's still a little moist, but it is drying fairly well. I'm lucky to have this very dry weather. Obviously drying it's not going to help unless I can work out where it's leaking from and fix that leak. So it's possibly up here. If I look at this timber in more detail, I can probably work out where. It's all a bit dirty, but it should in theory be all watertight up here. Since I've got to get rid of it anyway, I'll start clearing off some of this putty tape here and the sealant. I'll go back over it with white spirits just to get the rest of it off, but this will get the majority off. There's a piece of rubber that they've stapled in place here. Now this isn't on the other side, which is a bit odd. It's like they all, unless this is an original part of, it could be original part of the rubber roof. So this roof I replaced in 2011, I think. So I welded together this aluminium roof. Yeah, it's not the best work, but it's strong and it's watertight. The timber beneath the old rubber roof had all rotted away. So I think this could be some of that membrane for that original rubber roof. And I noticed that there's rust marks here, so the water's obviously getting, and here, water's obviously getting here. I wonder if it's either you've got this rail that I never use that is for an awning. I don't really want to remove it, but I think I could put some drain holes and make it a bit more watertight, and then I don't want to put the piece of trim back on here like I've done on the other side. I'll just use sealant here and screw it, and that way I can inspect it. Whereas the problem is with a little piece of trim, if it's starting to break away inside and is no longer waterproof, you can't really easily see it from the outside, which is maybe where this problem has come from. So in the past I've had to redo the entire back as well as the roof, so I've built a sort of custom back end that I could, with this step, which has turned out to be probably the most useful part of it, that I can then fit a swing out bike carrier to. And this side, or this front corner, I did last year or the year before. This wasn't rotted quite as badly as that side, but this is much more awkward to get to because there's no locker that you can just open up and get access to, and you have electrical input, you've got water input, and then here you've got the fridge. So you're trying to work from the outside and just sort of cut into it, so it's really quite awkward. And then behind that panel there's huge amounts of electric stuff, so that was a real pain. And of course you're working against this fence here. So this side, even though there's more rot, is a lot easier to work on because it's open and I can get the scaffolding tower in place, and it's just easy to work up there. This is it's over 30 years old now. We don't really need it to last more than, say, another 10 years. So you know, if I can repatch this up so it's good for 10 years, it doesn't have to look like a Rolls-Royce job. It just needs to do the trick and last that long. Oh dear, yeah, this is quite soft, quite a long way. I mean, that's very bad there. So I think I'm going to have to cut out a section, maybe up to there, and make and replace a longer section. That's a pretty structural piece, so I don't really want to mess with it. It's okay back here, towards the back. That bit's fine. Given that we're throwing away this piece of wood, probably the easiest way of tackling these staples is just to cut them with the angle grinder and then pull the remains out with the pliers. And then we'll try and cut to that line and then take a look and decide if I need to cut out any more. Right, there we go. This is dried out in here, it's looking a bit better. I'm going to add some extra reinforcing so that the upward pressure of the jacks here is distributed a bit better. So I've done it on that side. So on this side, really it used to just sit on this single piece of plywood here, and that was the original design. So I'm going to add extra reinforcing in here and various other places. So I reckon this is actually all I need to replace. But obviously, if I had the time, I'd replace the entire wing. But you know, I just need to get this back on the road before the weather changes. I don't have a nice barn to do this in, so we'll cut this down. This is just an offcut from a previous camper project. So I've clamped that in place and marked around it with a pencil, so I know. I just figured it would be easier to cut this square and then to cut to effectively use it as a template, and then cut the old wood to match. So I started screwing this replacement horizontal rail in, and I've put a bit of extra reinforcing on there. I had to shape this bit of wood because it's actually thicker than the timber here, so that this will pull in. I mean, I could narrow it down to the same thickness, but I prefer a bit of strength. Okay, I'll hold it in place for a little bit. To pull them back up together so they can be glued in. So I'm just going to try and screw a spare piece of timber underneath and use that as a pull them all in. So there's the new piece from the inside. It does still smell a bit of smoke in here, but where I was cutting the wood with the angle grinder, but that should clear over time, hopefully, or we'll be in trouble. I'll just get some extra glue down, sort of work it into this gap. I'm gluing a bit more reinforcing up here. Okay, I'm going to put some reinforcing pieces in horizontally. Previously I used plywood for this, but I reckon that all rotted away. I reckon this pressure treated timber will be better. So that looks a lot stronger, although I'd like a piece to slot in there and sort of join these two. I've put a screw up there and put some glue in, but I'd much rather have a piece of wood behind there as well. So I've got an old piece of that actually came, it's a bit of beech wood that I salvaged from an old chair, an old bench, garden bench. So I reckon if I plane that down, that might do. Okay, so that should be fairly solid in comparison to before. I've got reinforcing in there, and I've got so obviously this new piece. I've put a piece in here. Now I've got to drill the holes to bolt this jacking plate on. There's only one hole remains, which is this one here, so I've bolted it on with that, and then I can drill upwards using this as a template. One of the reasons for drilling these holes through at this point was just to see exactly where they would end up on this side. So I've started screwing and gluing in some reinforcing to go across, because I don't want this, whatever it is, 1/2 inch plywood being the only thing that these bolt onto. So I'm adding this reinforcing. Now I'm in two minds about this. I think what I might do, I could take this and sort of layer it all the way across, which will make it stronger for not much more weight, but I'm inclined maybe just to do the strips where the actual holes come through as reinforcing and leave the rest uncovered. And the reason for that is, if water gets in, I can then see that this is wet, whereas one of the problems before was it was all completely hidden. Okay, so I've ended up putting pieces crossways in, so I'm going to let that dry a bit, and then I'll drill up from the bottom, drill the holes through. While we wait for that to dry, I'm going to look at reattaching this. I need to clean this up, it's all a mess. Now what I'm going to do is I was trying to find some way of spacing this slightly so that if any moisture does get in, it will just run out this end instead of being sort of stuck against there. So I found these biscuits from a biscuit jointer, so I'm just going to staple these in to force a little bit of an air gap. So I've screwed this panel on, there's a bit of an air gap. I've roughly cleaned some of the sealant off, but I'm not going to do any more than that. You know, it's I need to get this on and before it starts raining. But that'll do, no one ever looks underneath the panel. But the next thing is I need to drill the holes for the jack brackets up through here. Now I've made this mistake before where I've just used a handheld drill and they've ended up at slight angles, and then it's been a nightmare with the bolts. So what I'm going to do is go back to this old drill and this stand, which hopefully I can keep it all at 90 degrees. Now, because the weather's looking a bit changeable, I think I'm going to switch tack here and start trying to get the cab over area closed up. So first thing I need to do is get some insulation in there, because I pulled a lot of the wet insulation out. So I bought this. This is sort of like the cheapest roll I could. I can just tear lumps off this and stuff them up there in the gaps. So you can see I've stuffed insulation in every crack I can, and now I'm just putting some temporary screws in just to hold it in shape. So the screws here and up there actually screw through the window and through this hatch, so but I'm trying to make sure everything goes back the way it should be. Once it's roughly held in place, I'll try and clean the rest of this sealant off. I think first I'll try and clean up the top corner there where the water might have been coming in, and see if I can do any sealing. So although it's all dirty, this sealant, that went on in 2012, no, 2011, it still looks complete, and even around the slightly messy, it's all gone horrible, but it all looks very solid. This is Sikaflex 512. It's all pretty damn solid around there, so I can't believe that's leaking. Clearly the aluminium's not leaking. There is a possibility down here though. There's a little gap here where I've welded this on, and I've got some bolt holes down there, and I just wonder if it leaks through here and it's getting in that way. Either that, or it's just been leaking down into here, because certainly this area is where it was wet. Now there's normally a trim strip that runs along here, but I also have a suspicion that all that does is hides any possible leaking here. So as with the other side, I'm just going to leave that off, put sealant in here, screw it together, make sure it's properly sealed, and then at least I can see from the outside afterwards whether it's started to crack and needs more maintenance. Now there are people who can use a caulking gun and just do it freehand. I'm not one of those people. It makes a lot of mess if I try and do that, so I rely on masking tape, because I can then just pull the tape off and get a clean seam, a clean edge. Also, this stuff is fantastic. This is 522, which is a replacement for 512, but it's the same stuff. But it sticks to absolutely everything. You get it on your fingers, you get it on your clothing. You know, it's just, it loves to stick to things, which is good from a sealant point of view. Not so good for your washing. But what I tend to do when cleaning it off is I use white spirit. I don't think you're supposed to use white spirit, get white spirit on it, but actually I've often done that, and you know, I've done that on these, and it's lasted what 12 years so far, and so it's actually pretty resilient stuff. squirt a whole load in this seam here. So this is where the white spirit or turpentine or whatever you call it comes in. If I'll wet my finger with a bit of that. Again, you're supposed to be able to use water, but I find this works very well. Mainly I'm trying to prevent it sticking to my finger. If it sticks to my finger, it just drags everywhere and makes a real mess. I'll put a little dab of sealant on here. Right, that'll probably do. So next thing, we need to seal this up, but look at the decals on here. So what I'll do is, because they're just peeling off, at the end it's got this sort of an S shape. I'm not going to go to that effort, but if I sort of put a slice in at a similar angle, then it'll sort of match, and it'll give it a sort of a nice clean edge rather than this awful edge here. Well, it's a bit scruffy still, but it looks a bit better than before when they were just sort of ragged ends. So I'll put some sealant on here. Again, I haven't put that decal strip on then, so I've just put plain sealant on, just like I did at the top, so I can keep an eye on it in future. I've started screwing this panel back in place, because I'm not going to use staples. They're a complete pain to get out later, so I'm just using little screws. I think they're 3 by 12mm. The next thing I need to do is replace the piece of aluminium that was here. It just rotted away, electrolytic corrosion, because water got into it, and so I had to cut it out. And I just found a spare bit of aluminium from when I did the rear of the camper, and I've screwed it in place along here, just so I can now bend it up at the edge here. Well, there we go. That's looking better than certainly the previous one. I think I should cut and repaint a new piece of this. This is a packing that goes between the jack plate and the underside here. Got another bit of plywood I could use for that, which has seen many uses before, in the artillery tractor, then in the pickup truck, and that will be reused in here. I could get the circular saw out to do this, but it's such a cumbersome piece of kit. I'll just do it slower with the jigsaw. Okay, so there's one coat of hammerite on that, and that's drying in the sun. Coat of primer on this. It might take a bit longer to dry. And I've cleaned off all the sealant from this window. Actually, a lot of the putty tape on there was very good, so I just replaced some of it. Now, previously with this edging here, I'd used sealant on the screws because I was worried about water getting driven up into them or capillary action. But I'm thinking now, by putting sealant along here, all I did was ensure that any moisture inside couldn't drain out, so I'm not going to bother doing that this time. So I've put all these screws in, no, not fully tight yet. And now next thing I'm going to mask around here, because I'm going to use sealant around the edge and I don't want it making a mess. Also, I'm going to withdraw these screws a bit at a time and put some sealant down inside them, so that water doesn't get in through the screw holes. So the difficulty here is getting this trim in without getting it covered in sealant. That locker's screwed in. Now I'll start getting this bit of trim back on. And put the next bit of trim on. Put some of this sort of putty tape on. This isn't as good as the stuff that was originally on the camper. I'm not sure where I got this from. It's horrible sticky stuff. And then this can be screwed in here. Okay, that bit's on. There it is. Not the most wonderful job in the world, but it will do the trick. This is a bit of a hurry job now. It wasn't going to be at the start of the week, but turns out where I thought I didn't need the camper for nearly 3 months, I actually now need it tomorrow. So rush is on now. So that's the tie down. This is all stainless steel yacht rigging. Now another change I'm hoping not to regret is that this tie down was a lot closer to the edge here, and with this slightly thicker wood I've put in, I thought that's not going to work. So I've moved it back and in a little bit. Hopefully that does not cause me a problem, for example with the fuel filler cap on the truck. One of the least fun jobs before you put any trim back on is everything is covered with this putty tape and the sealant that's been used before. Right, this is all sealed now, which is a slow, mucky job. I hate doing this. It gets everywhere. And I've bolted this on. I haven't used this in years. This came as the original sort of tie down point, but it was just attached to plywood. Now at least I put strong timber behind there, so I put some proper bolts on through to the other side in case I need to use that. That's the proper tie down there, but in emergencies I could always attach to that. Okay, its jacking point is slightly inboard from where it's supposed to be, but it still does fit in the socket at the bottom. I might have got away with this. Let's see. Looks like it's bearing weight. Well, nothing is bowing or cracking, so hopefully that's all right. Next, to load it on the truck very carefully without getting this all over me. Masking tape. Well, it's on and it still fits, and nothing's broken in loading it on, so that's really good. So I guess we'll find out tomorrow how well it handles, and well, not expecting anything to fall apart, should be fine.